Hello.
Hey, George.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Alexa. All right. I see people are already starting to log in. So that's exciting. We are live on LinkedIn. Super excited for this chat today. So I know we're kind of going to cover product led growth strategy for enterprise organizations. Super awesome to have you both. I'll let you guys introduce yourself. We can start with George.
Hey everyone, George Soto here. I am director of community and partnerships here at Reprise. Super excited. We've been on the product-led growth sort of, I don't want to say bandwagon because that sort of seems negative, but the this movement. The last few years we sort of have an angle to it. And Alexa, it's good to see you. I know this is not our first rodeo together.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Adriana, and it's so good to see you, George. My name is Alexa. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pocus, and we are a product-led sales platform. So we help revenue teams at PLG companies turn all of their great data into revenue. So excited to be chatting about enterprise mixed with PLG, mixed with PLS, and all that good stuff, and very open to questions throughout in the chat. Or if there's a raise your hand feature, I'm not sure. So feel free to ask us questions as we go.
Awesome. So I will let you guys kind of get to it in terms of asking questions and everything. If you are watching and you have a question for George or for Alexa, pop it in the chat, either here on AirMeet or on LinkedIn, and they would love to answer it for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adriana. Alexa, it's good again. Good to connect again on this topic.
Yeah.
Real quick, I just for the folks out there, and I guess because I'm sort of moderating, it's not too biased here. But why don't you tell folks a little bit about POCUS and what is
Mhm.
PLS, right? I think that's so
Yes.
specific to the enterprise, right? I think it's a requirement.
Yep. Totally. I love it. That's actually where I was hoping you would start because I think there's a lot of buzzwords. Like you said, there's been a bandwagon with a lot of different three-letter acronyms. So I'll start with kind of what is PLG in my mind, what is PLS, and then we can talk about what is POCUS. So PLG at its simplest term in my mind is the product itself is used to drive customer acquisition and retention and expansion. And you think about all of those companies like Slack and Notion and Zoom, where you sign up for the product and you get to value. Where PLS comes in is when you have this strong self-serve motion or lots of users on the product, and those users are what's driving revenue. So you get to pluck from those existing users of your product so far to then drive revenue such as conversion and cross-sell and expansion. So sales teams at product-led growth companies are really lucky that they have superpowers in the form of data, where if I'm a salesperson at the Slacks or Notions or Zooms of the world, I can already see users on the product that love the product, that use it, and I can just help them get to more value through that sales motion. So that's where product-led sales comes in. And then where POCUS comes in is as a product-led sales platform. So we help sales teams run that motion and run those playbooks of saying, you have a lot of users on your product. How do we give you insights into that data so that you can surface the best opportunities to be going after and then take the next best action to make those customers get to higher value and drive deals across that product-led growth company. So I can talk about more in the weeds what POCUS does or take this anyway, but any questions about that so far, George?
It's interesting because I think, what you're doing with product-led sales is so important for organizations of all sizes, right? And I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest pushbacks that you've heard, I think, over the last few years around PLG specifically was like, well, we have a sales team, like our product's not a credit card swipe, right? And
Yeah.
so, which totally makes sense. And I think that the vast majority of um, the organizations out there, they have sales teams. They'll have a
Mhm.
product led entry point, right? But they there needs to be that human assisted component to the overall motion.
Yes. Exactly. And if you think about why all of this happened, it's really the way that we buy and sell software has really changed. The old school way to buy and sell, you can think of like Oracle and SAP and Salesforce, where they just reach out cold, put a lot of marketing dollars towards it, figure out, just cold outbound to everyone in the world, hoping that you land a single potentially qualified lead and sell that way. And it's really about more of the relationship building. And you think of kind of steak and wine dinners and golf. And now there's a little bit new world where every single buyer just wants to sign up online and try something, or at the least talk to someone, but quickly get your hand to your company and yourself to value. So it's not a lot of stages. It's how do we get to value as quickly as possible? So this new motion is really having access to product in the form of demos, freemium, free trials, self-serve, you name it. So that users can really try before they buy, understand the value before making huge purchasing decisions.
Awesome. Real quick, Antoinette Duffy asks, what is the flexibility to iterate sales process and change on the fly? I don't know, Alexa, I don't know if we need more context on that. I suppose, iterating the process when you're doing or deploying a PLS motion.
Yeah. So, Antoinette, let me know if this is going the direction that you meant. So what I actually see in this product-led sales world is that you do need to iterate and experiment way more than traditional sales. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of different signals that you can see in your data to reach out to. So if I'm a salesperson at a product-led growth company, there's a lot I can be looking at. I can see, maybe I want to reach out to all of the people in IT that have signed up, or all of the users that are decision makers, or all of the users that are in engineering, or all of the users that have used this feature. And you have to constantly experiment with who am I going to reach out to and what playbook am I going to run? And it's not as cookie cutter as the traditional sales process. And so I do think that you need to constantly have that flexibility to be iterating sales processes and playbooks over time. And this is how much effort does it take to make those changes? Yeah, so I would say it depends on like how efficient your team is and the tooling you have. This is kind of why we built a product like POCUS, so that you can build and test different PQLs or product qualified leads, as well as playbooks to run, which then inform your sales motion. So so long as you have the tooling, you have the right kind of culture in place as a team that you're willing to ship and iterate over time, as well as a really strong cross-functional kind of tiger team of folks from sales and growth and product, I think it's a good thing to be constantly iterating. George, do you have anything else to add to that?
I guess my question the question that pops up is like, what are those data points that and I know that's a sort of a hard question to answer, just because it could vary, right, based on the product and in place right now. But are there any sort of like maybe a checklist of best practices around, hey, make sure that you're tracking these particular data points?
Yeah. So in terms of the question from Mark, which is awesome. So there's two things. It's like, what data should you be tracking? And then what are the benchmarks? For the benchmarks of have you started seeing typical conversion numbers for freemium, free trials into paid? This is going to be a non-satisfactory answer, Mark. But the answer is it really depends on both your product and your company strategy and what you're looking for. So some companies will say, we just want every single user on the product for free, and it's going to be a long-term lead gen pipeline. We don't care if they're using the free product for a while. We'll worry about it later once we have an enterprise deal. So they're not optimizing for free to paid conversion. They're likely optimizing for just product usage and brand awareness and adoption and a million other things. Whereas some companies are driving towards the reason that a free user comes to the product is because in the next 2 weeks after the free trial is over, they want them to convert. So obviously that methodology should be a lot higher. Like if you're saying, I want 100% of free trials to convert, like your number should be somewhere near that, or it really depends. And I've seen a huge range. In terms of the data to be tracking to figure that out, we think about at Pocus, how we recommend to our customers and our community and how we think about it is there's a lot of different conversion metrics across various stages of a PLG journey. So you might have conversion starting out from the free plan to the paid plan, and then you might have conversion from the paid plan to the enterprise plan, and then you might have conversion for upsell and expansion. And so you want to keep tracking these to figure out, what are the major milestones or conversion events that we should be improving upon that relate to our company strategy? And then how do we know when a customer is likely to enter that conversion point? So is it when they've used a certain feature? Is when they have more than 5 users? Is it when they've invited others? And constantly iterating to improve those conversion metrics that you care about.
So they're really looking for that or those core inflection points, and then optimizing against that. That reminds me of something that the early head of business at Asana told me many years ago, Kenny. And I was having lunch with Kenny, and this was what year was this? 2013 or something like that. In any case, and he said, what we realized was that our sort of influencer internally was or champion was the individual who invited the most colleagues to the Asana board, right? And we knew at that point that we could reach out to that individual and that they were again already sort of a champion and this is kind of a departure in a way, right, from the budget holder, right, and a title based kind of model, right, where it's like, no, it's actually this activity based, and that person might have the right title, quote unquote, the right title, but maybe not, right? Maybe that individual is the individual that you then use as a salesperson to then navigate the organization, right, and start to understand it a little more. So that's what comes to mind when you mention that sort of that core or super important data to
I totally agree. It's interesting because there's similarities across companies of what important signals are, like the virality, inviting others, the usage, but some companies it can be totally different. It's like they care about, I don't know, every time this person in this industry signs up, or someone with this title, or someone who's interacted with the marketing page. So I think there's similarities across companies, but I usually urge customers to take existing playbooks that have worked for others, but make it your own. Figure out what are the important things, because the product at Asana might look really, really different than a Dropbox, which might look really, really different than a Figma. And so you need to figure out what those metrics are.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about the enterprise specifically. You hear it all the time. I mentioned earlier, our product is not a credit card swipe. It's too complex. It's not something that can be product led. So if you had to answer the why, maybe start off with the why and the how, following up the enterprise should consider a product led motion, what would you tell those folks, that CRO out there, that's really kind of wrestling with this, and they're getting messages from the board saying, you got to go PLG or figure this out?
Yeah, totally. So first, maybe let's talk about why they should go PLG and PLS, and then let's talk about why I think it's kind of a myth that they can't have both. So why PLG, why PLS? In the simplest form, it's buyers prefer it. They want to try before they buy. Sellers prefer it. Sellers at your company are going to want to reach out to people that have already tried and used your product or have heard of it. And execs do prefer it because it's a lower cost to acquire new customers from an existing fan base rather than going out cold. And also other reasons are that when you have the mix of the product-led growth model with enterprise sales motion, you can have benefits such as demanding higher contract sizes because you get a human involved. You can pull forward revenue that might have, it might have been a 6-month sales cycle, but with a human, you can lower that to 3 and accelerate that sales cycle. So there's obvious benefits to having both in terms of kind of what buyers and sellers like, but also execs at an organization. And the reason that I think this is kind of a myth, I think that what happens is that PLG companies get to a point where they want to lean more into enterprise, which is great. Like that just means that they're maturing, and you need to have both and two really strong motions. And so how I think about that is almost using PLG as a lead generation or pipeline for enterprise businesses. And so what that looks like, if I'm at Airtable, and I know Airtable is leaning a lot into enterprise right now, there's tons of, like, and I'm trying to sell into Apple, for example, there's going to be tons of users on Apple, at Apple on Airtable already. And so what I can then do is consolidate all the users that are already on Airtable and then bring it to the decision maker there and run an enterprise deal. So if anything, I really do think that companies aren't going to start like separating the two, like PLG versus enterprise. It's really, you need product-led sales. You need one motion to go from, okay, we're using PLG as a lead generation source, as pipeline, to make it a lot easier to run an enterprise sales motion.
That reminds me of a webinar that I was on with one of the SVPs of sales at Pendo, and they didn't separate it, right? It was they had this sort of this graph on the screen, and I remember it was the product they actually had, and there was a question here by Jillian. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which I'll get to in a second, my opinion. But it was interesting. Like one of the sort of entry points into their funnel was the free product, right? And then that ended up forking out to the specific market tier, right? And then another one was the product demo that they had. Another one was inbound forms, right? So they really looked at it as not this separate thing that lived in a silo, because I don't think that really works. Well, I got to take that back, because there's probably folks out there that have some version. But when we're talking about some, generally speaking, I think that the best way to approach it is as, hey, this is the entry point into our funnel, and this is on par with outbound, right? This is on par with inbound forms, that sort of stuff, right?
Yep. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you are operating with PLG and enterprise as two separate motions, there's so much low hanging fruit you're missing, in my opinion. You really need to connect those two motions to realize the benefit. I also think that a misconception is that product-led sales is only used for like converting from free to paid. I think if you are consistently taking that product-led sales approach to say, I'm going to analyze product usage data to inform cross-sell opportunities, to inform upsell, expansion, even churn prevention, you are coming from a much stronger position of data and information around product usage versus just going up to an existing customer saying, hey, how do you like the product? Like, do you want to upgrade? So I think it really is kind of a way of operating product-led sales that you can expand beyond just the first enterprise purchase through going from maybe the first land all the way through multiple expansions. So I do think, like, all of that to summarize, one, making sure that you have the PLG and enterprise motions very connected and working really well together. And then two, keeping that product-led sales mindset all the way through the first purchase to multiple expansions in the long term.
There's another example that comes to mind when I worked at Twitter. I remember, I don't know if folks remember Yesware, one of those early outreach SalesLoft type tools. And I remember I happened to know the CEO quite well at that time. I remember he came and visited Yesware, and his whole, or Twitter HQ, I should say, and his whole pitch was, hey, sales ops or sales enablement team over there at Twitter, you have 180 people using the free product. You should probably upgrade to be able to get the security and the reporting and et cetera, et cetera. They're using it every day. Here are the power users, to talk to them, right? So if you think about that, for the sales leaders out there right now who are thinking about that, they were going for a enterprise deal, right? They weren't there, obviously, just checking up on free users. But what they did was they were strategically leveraging the free users to then sell it, right? So what did they do? They went and talked to the power users, like, hey, if this goes away, how is this going to impact you, right? And they knew that those power users were using the tool quite heavily and
Yeah.
integrated into the workflow. And then you have, the rest of the user base who are using them as well. So I thought that was a great example that always comes to mind on how do you
Yeah.
like mesh the freemium very top of the funnel with the enterprise motion. And I think they actually ended up getting that deal done, from what I
Yeah.
remember.
I love it. Fantastic example.
Right. All right, real quick, Jillian Hood, I'll get to your question here. So Jillian asked a question for myself. So far, we've been talking about, metrics for free trial and premium or freemium. Is there a difference in approach or considerations when prospects are interacting with a demo? So, I couple things. This is my opinion. I think that the there isn't a difference in approach in terms of like there are certain actions that a prospect is going to use inside a product experience. Now that product experience might be the free trial or the freemium version of your product. And if they do certain things like we talked about earlier, like invite colleagues to the instance or to the account or the whatever the functionality is, and we know that then anytime that happens, conversion rates go through the roof. And we want to have that baseline sort of tracking in place to start to understand that. So if you think about, well, what's the MVP? Let me not over engineer. Let me select a couple of these activities, user activities, to start to track. That is an example of the interaction that drives success. I think the same sort of framework can be applied to product demos, And so, Jillian, I'm guessing you're talking about like a demo or product tour on the website. Of course, we do that. So that's why I think you're asking that question. So it may be awesome. Yeah, it may be this. It may be after the user completes, or the prospect that on the product tour completes 5 pages. We know that if they do that, that the conversion rate goes through the roof, right? We know that on page 4, if they click on the let's say there's a CTA, because you can have, generally in these types of experiences, you can have like pop-ups and stuff like that, right? We know that if they click on a specific link at that step, that conversion rates go through the roof. So it's like very much thinking about this experience like a product manager. This is what product managers have been doing it for years, to understand how to push folks or users through a successful product experience. I mean, it's a very similar sort of approach, right? So again, it's, I think from a data aggregation perspective, um, and data analysis, it's not different. Of course, what you're working with is different. You have this, demo experience, product tour, et cetera, versus an actual product. And the free trial might be that they continue to use that product, right? Versus the product tour, it's just sort of a cloned experience. Then they go into the actual production environment product. So from that perspective, that's sort of like I think the considerations to think about. There's another model too where you can hybrid these things, right? So imagine a world where you have a free trial, um, or a freemium product, and then you go into a demo experience, or vice versa, right? You have a fully baked product tour experience, and then it's like there's a CTA in there. Want to now try the free trial or the free product? So all these sorts of things that I would just absolutely A/B test in the same way that we A/B test landing pages and home pages and etc. So that's sort of my take on it, and what I've heard some of the best practices have been. Anything, Alexa? Because I know you're one of the leaders on planet Earth in PLS, of course, and PLG.
Thank you. I don't know about that. I think you are, but thank you. No, I think that was really well said. And it goes for everything PLG and PLS. It's experimentation. It's a lot of A/B testing. It's a lot of, shipping something. Did it work? If yes, double down. If not, figure out what works. And the reason that there's not as much of a cookie cutter solution as traditional enterprise sales is that every product is different. So every sales motion is different. And so the data is going to look different. And so what resonates with end users is going to look different. So I completely agree with everything you just said.
Totally. Well, let's get into like the organizations that
Yeah.
actually own this product-led motion.
Yeah.
Um, and I know this is something that I've seen that sort of vary. There's some organizations that have their own like, PLG task force. There are like Hootsuite. I know Hootsuite, they have someone who is, and this is interesting, right? Someone who's the director of product in like inside the growth team, so on the marketing team here. And it was different, so it's not a product manager. They actually have a product manager who also is involved, but this is the stakeholder on the revenue side that is tasked with using product to drive growth. And then you have folks on the sales team, right, who are thinking about it,
Mm-hmm.
like that VP or those sales ops people, those sort of things. So like who should be owning this within the organization?
Yeah, this is a hot debate right now. And I'll give you the quick answer, and then I'll tell you some other things I've seen. The quick answer is it has to be cross-functional. This is not something that product or growth or sales or marketing can like go heads down and spit out the perfect PLS or PLG engine. So why it needs to be cross-functional is that it really does involve so many different folks on how they do their day to day, what leads to go after, what leads should even be surfaced. And so, what I see successful companies do is create, like you mentioned, growth squads or tiger teams of people across sales and marketing and product and growth to do things like define what a product qualified lead is, and then roll that and continue to iterate on it with the sales team. And it really, how I mostly see it in organizations is that the product team will own initial user and acquisition and adoption before sales gets involved. So they're owning how do we get a lot of users onto the product without needing any human interaction. And then where sales comes in is to say, okay, how sales and growth and product and marketing will say, how do we actually define what the right lead is to go from just using the product to interacting with a salesperson? And should that be someone that's interacting with the salesperson? Should that be an AE? Should that be an SDR? Should that be a sales assist person? So that all of those decisions get really tackled as a cross-functional team. And then the end users of the PQL, so the people that are actually saying, okay, this is the PQL that I want to reach out to, and this is the action I'm going to take, typically is sales. So it starts with product, then it goes through and it's a cross-functional tiger team to define, iterate, experiment with PQLs, and then sales teams are the ones that are actually surfacing and actioning those PQLs. So it really is a cross-functional process.
I think when we started to talk about PLG a lot 2.5 years ago or so, I remember we would post a bunch of stuff on LinkedIn and we'd get salespeople upset, and I'd be like, why are salespeople so upset? Like in my mind, like you have this other pool of prospects that I mean, really, right? That are already in your product, who already know you. And even if they just signed up and never used it, they still had enough awareness and intent to actually at least, sign up to your product. And I remember they were getting so upset, you know, and I think, I sort of figured out that I think a lot of, and I don't know if this is still true. I suspect it is. A lot of salespeople were just sort of maybe apprehensive or apprehensive or scared that PLG or PLS meant that their jobs were going away, right? So what would you say to those sales organizations, right? And this is super important because as we all know, we are all humans, and you could have a wonderful strategy, wonderful product on paper and etc. But if the humans are not working together, you're in you're gonna have a challenging time operationalizing. So what would you say to those sales organizations, those sales folks about this, maybe this concern?
Yeah, your jobs, no sales jobs are going away. There's not going to be a world where the product can completely sell itself. I do think the role is shifting. So, what you have to be good at as an SDR, an AE, or sales assist at a PLG company is you have to be comfortable with data, and you have to be comfortable understanding who are existing users of the platform and how should I have a strategic outreach to someone based on how they already adopted the platform and how can I add value to them versus the traditional sales rep that's like, let me just reach out to everyone on LinkedIn and hopefully I get a bite. And so I think that there's always going to be salespeople and no one's job is going like out of date or will be replaced in the future. But what I do see is the type of sales rep that wins and kind of succeeds in this world is way more data driven and way more kind of thoughtful about their outreach.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? Do you agree with that, George? I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. I think the only caveat that I sort of think about is, um, well, what happens if you don't have the right support to drive or to create
Yeah.
a pool, right? Because that's to your point, it has to be in like an entire organizational thing, and if there's any fragmentation or misalignment, like it could go sideways. And so that's the only
Totally.
piece. And then you sort of back into this old school thing. But I remember Doug Landis, who's over at
Mhm.
Emergence, he talked about the future of the SDR being that individual who was really a product specialist, right?
Mhm.
They're not trying to like, get you on a demo because theoretically within a PLS motion, you're in the product a bit, now, how much do you get in terms of understanding is TBD. I think it depends on the product and the use case, but it's certainly not starting at zero, right? So
Yeah.
it shouldn't just like pop open, and that's the benefit, right? One of the great benefits of a PLS PLG motion again is that you're not starting at zero. They're in
Yeah.
there. That's the only thing. If you don't have that support, you don't have
Yeah.
that pull. Um, so that's
I agree.
kind of a thing. The other thing I would say is like the salesperson who was just like, oh, super, cool person. That's all they had. Um, I don't know. I don't know how you're going to excel in a world where people are going to want to kick the tires on your product,
Mhm.
and it's just going to happen. Now, has it happened? What's the sort of penetration of this motion within the overall overarching market thus far? I'm not sure. I don't have exact numbers on that, but I know it's moving to that, right? We all know
Mhm.
that we used to pick up the phone to call an organization, and then we went to web forms and then chat and et cetera. We'll see what happens in the future. So we know that the consumerization of
Mhm.
B2B or the enterprise happening. And so it just makes sense. You have to adopt, right? Um,
Totally.
and adopt this motion. And the salesperson has to be more of a product expert, because then they're just going to get on the phone. Hey, how's it going? How's your day? How's the weather? Do you have dogs? Oh, great. And then they're like, well, look, I'm already in your product. What value are you bringing? You have to be that expert.
Yep. How's the weather? Do you have dogs? That should be that should I love that. I'm gonna reuse that. That's the old school way. But we can still ask each other, if you have dogs.
Yeah,
I'm still
for
okay with
sure.
that.
But then I got to
Um
go into actually adding value and actually knowing my product, and not just someone who's showing you screens on a
yeah,
Zoom, right? But
yep,
like on the strategy, right? This person becomes more strategic, in my
totally.
opinion.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point you made that also links into the questions we're getting in the chat of, how do you get buy-in from the top to set the company up to make sure that SDRs, product specialists, AEs are set up for success. And a lot of that does come down to the tooling and having systems and processes in place to make it easy for salespeople to get access to this data. And so, Claire, your point of, systems for sales teams, they feel completely separate, which is to everyone's detriment. That's exactly where Pocus. That's what I saw being in sales ops, and that's why I started Pocus. Because what happens in product-led growth companies, a lot of that great data that you need around product usage is living in a data warehouse. So you can think about Snowflake. And maybe you have a tool like Looker or a BI tool that sits on top of that. But then all the data around sales is sitting in a CRM like Salesforce and HubSpot. And so you have two very disjointed data sets that sales needs access to, and they're hard to speak to each other. And so that's why we built Focus, to bring those two data sets into one. So you can see, who are the best accounts to go after, who are the best users to go after, the best teams to go after, based on both who they are, industry, geography, company size, as well as how they're engaging with your product. The next question. Oh, go ahead, George.
There was a question from Sumaya Noor.
Oh.
What are some of the challenges which both of you have observed or experienced in implementing PLG from a B2B to C enterprise product? I don't have any firsthand knowledge there, but I don't know if, Alexa, if you have any insight around that.
Yeah, I actually think the B2B2C probably has a similar motion to B2C2B, which is really a lot of the PLG companies. So I would assume that all of the challenges are pretty similar, in the sense of, how do you make sure that you're experimenting fast enough? How do you make sure you have the systems in place? How do you level up your sales team to make sure they can be data driven? And yeah, I don't have a great answer there, but if you want to add more specifics about the company you're referring to, we can double click into that.
Awesome. So, question from LinkedIn chat. I am part of a large enterprise group that sells commodities, and we are currently interviewing several CRMs for about 200 users. Some of the greatest sales gaps we have identified is lack of communication from.
Dun, dun, dun.
Looks like, yeah, maybe Thomas, if or Adriana, if there's more context there, we're happy to jump on there. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. You're very welcome, Sumaya.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. Some of the greatest gaps we have identified is lack of communication from sales reps to buyer when trial expires. Okay, 99% of the time it's just an automated email. How would you suggest to improve this CTA? Got it. Okay, great.
Yep, this is a common one. So this is what I would. Sorry, George, do you want to kick it off, or should I?
No. I mean, this is what you're dealing with every day. So,
So yeah, this is an example of what we talked about before around how do you build playbooks to make sure that you're hitting conversion metrics that you want. So what I'm hearing here is that you have lack of communication when a trial expires. And when a trial expires, all you're getting is an email message. But there might be scenarios where you need to proactively insert a human rep to reach out if it's a high priority account. Maybe they didn't get to their aha moment in the trial. Maybe they have been really active, but they didn't swipe their credit card to go to the next stage. And so this is where you need to have product signals reaching out to sales teams, not just triggering off an automated email sequence. It doesn't have to be everyone on a trial, but find those that it makes sense to reach out to, because maybe there is a really good opportunity for a huge enterprise deal. Or maybe because you think someone didn't get all the value they can out of the product and there's potential churn risk. So this is where I would set up playbooks based on product signals to say, every time someone is in the last 5 days of their trial, I want to be alerted when they invite 3 other people, when usage spikes, when this type of persona signs up, when usage declines, and so that you can take the proper action that it was required more than just an email sequence.
I remember when I worked at this startup many years ago. Wow, it's 10 years. Gosh, I just remembered it's 2023. So yeah, it's been 10 years since we sold that business. In any case, I remember we had essentially a product-led motion where we had an open source SDK that mobile developers would download, install, use for free completely, right? And so we had all these signups, and what we did was we started to look at other attributes that would suggest qualification. And so without getting too deep into it, we were dealing with mobile apps, right? And so we were an ad server, and so we wanted to know which mobile apps had the highest volume of impressions. Now you couldn't know that unless unless you like directly, because that's all first party data behind the the firewall, right? So we had to look at other what are some other attributes, and so we started to look at like number of reviews that an application had. So we'd say, okay, this user signed up, installed our SDK. Let's now go to the App Store. We had some tools to do that and see, did they have a certain number of reviews, and then what was the delta, right, of around growth. And so there were these variables that were, third party information that we could now over time start to infer that, okay, they have a certain number of impressions, because anytime organizations have this number of reviews and then is growing at this rate, according to third party external signals, they're going to be qualified. So was it an exact science? No, but it really helped, as opposed to just completely shooting in the dark. So really
I
looking
love that
for those
example.
other, yeah, right. Qualification, right? And again, and that's why at some point, this PLS motion is, there's humans that are involved to take it that last mile. And but you need the automation up front, or else you just have no chance, right? You're literally just walking in the dark. So those are some things that come to mind for me. Andres Charles asks how to find the aha moment in the earlier stages. We sort of spoke to this a little earlier, Andres, but it was really those inflection points. Would you say, Alexa?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Am I echoing, or am I good on your end?
You're good.
Oh, good. No, I think this is, Andres, a good point of finding the aha moment. It depends on kind of the company, what it's going to be, and you can run different experiments here. So if you want to say, let's say you have 100 paying customers, what you can do is actually look at your data and say, what actually converted them from free to paid? What are the commonalities amongst these users that have led them to being successful? What you can also do is actually like conduct customer interviews to say, when was it for you that you felt like you had the aha moment in our product? You can also look in your product to see not just the conversion from free to paid, but you can see when was the moment where usage spiked, which feature did they click on, which activity did they take. I think that companies can overthink this a bit and get really in the weeds, and especially if you're on the smaller size and don't have like millions and millions of users, I wouldn't recommend going the whole like AI analysis paralysis mode. I would say keep it simple and figure out based on customer interviews, based on basic data analysis of what good looks like from your customer base so far. That would be a good starting point.
Awesome. Great. And hello to Argentina. Love Argentina. I've been there a couple of times. I have good friends there. Awesome. Well, why don't we get into, I know we have a couple minutes left here, and a couple other things we wanted to cover. Why don't we get into PQLs? And this is so important, right? Because it's sort of, I think, lends itself well with what we've been talking about. Once we start to understand the data, understand these early aha moments that users are having, these sort of things. And how do you, what is a PQL, and how do you start to formulate it, and what do you do with that information? Is it something that only the sales team can leverage, or are there automated ways that data could be leveraged?
Yeah, I love that. So talking about what a PQL is. So just basic definition, a product qualified lead is a user that is ripe for some sort of conversion, whether it's conversion from free to paid, conversion to an expansion, based on who they are and how they've interacted with your product. So based on things like customer fit, industry, geography, company size, as well as usage. Did they use a certain feature? Did they invite others? Did they log in every day for the past week? Those sort of metrics. So that is a product qualified lead. They qualify for some certain criteria for a conversion event that you can then take action on. There's also a concept of product qualified accounts, which can be when there's a lot of different users, PQLs, that qualify within an account. That account can become a product qualified account, so a PQA. And really, there could be PQ anything. There could be a product qualified domain. There could be a product qualified workspace, team, whatever that is. And really, what it's just saying is there's a certain user, a certain team, a certain account that has entered some sort of playbook that is ripe for conversion, and that a sales rep should reach out, or you should put them into some marketing cadence. So you'll have lots of different PQLs and PQAs in organizations. I actually think a big myth is when organizations will come to me and say, or companies will come to me and say, we want to define our PQL. I'm like, okay, your PQL from self-serve to paid, or your PQL for enterprise consolidation, and your PQL at the user level, or the PQA at the account level. So it's really just a bunch of metrics or signals to help you inform who to reach out to and what actions to take.
That's interesting because, one thing that comes to mind, and I don't have the answer here, and this is, I think relative, is like, well, does the way that the PQL or how the PQL is determined, does it vary based on the channel that it was initiated in? So, in other words, if someone comes and signs up to your product via the website inbound, and they, came in via marketing activities, does that change the way the PKO is figured out versus, let's say, you have salespeople doing outbound, sending people to sign up to product? Just so I don't know if you've seen any sort of variances there.
Yeah, I think a lot of things determine the PQL, the channel, but also kind of what is your conversion goal. So the PQLs for conversion from the free plan to the paid plan, or the goal for getting users to convert from free trial to a paid customer, or the goal to consolidate a bunch of users in one account for an enterprise license, it all looks really different. So for maybe self-serve to paid, you're going to want to just see that they've been in the product for 30 days. Or for the free trial, you're going to want to see that they hit some certain feature. For enterprise consolidation, maybe you want to see that there's at least 3 different workspace and 100 users. So I think of it as kind of the different conversion events will require different ways that you look at and establish your PQLs.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about just the plumbing for or the tech stack for putting together PQLs, and
Yeah.
then the distribution of that information, right? Because I think for folks out there, hopefully they're understanding, hey, there's this data that I need to be able to collect, those aha moments. What are those inflection points? What are those the combination of user activity that we know now drives conversion? Once we've sort of aggregated that information and we have a decent understanding of that, even though it could vary over time, what is the tech stack or those sets of tools that folks should really start to think about?
Yeah, so the baseline of what you should have is we recommend having a data warehouse and a CRM to collect all the data. And that's where your data sits. That's the system of record, source of truth for your data. But to actually then define PQLs and surface them and take action on them, I mean, that's where Focus comes in. So we actually help you define what those different PQLs should be. So the stuff we were talking about with RevOps and growth and product, how do you define what a PQL is? And then also surfacing it to the sales rep at the right time and telling them how to take action on it. So for example, let's say that one PQL that you want to create a PQL for free to paid conversion. And Focus will suggest that one of those PQLs is every single time someone invites 5 users and they are on the marketing team, that means that they are ripe for conversion, so they're a PQL. And so you should reach out to them. So that lead will get surfaced in Focus inbox to the right sales rep that owns that territory and owns free to paid conversion. They can see that lead and they can see the action they have to take. Maybe the action is reach out to the decision maker, or create a contact in Salesforce, or email them, or research them on LinkedIn. And so all of that can happen. So you can think of Focus as both the platform to define what those signals or PQLs or playbooks are, and then also how to operationalize them with your team.
Fantastic. Now, there are folks out here, or on this webinar and just in general in the market who are sitting down and going, okay, now, I've been asked to try to figure out what this PLG thing is. If I'm starting at that position, or from that perspective, and I have to look at freemium, free trials. I mean, even product demos, right? From what we're doing over here at Reprise, what would you recommend for those organizations that are assessing about now starting to go PLG or PLS, right? And if you're
Yeah.
enterprise, you have to do PLS, right? Like
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
most
yeah.
part, right?
So do you mean how do you start seeing this data, figuring out the data, working from there?
Or how do you, let's say you're at 0, right? And how do you start to determine I'm going to now build a free trial versus a freemium product
Mm,
versus, you know what,
yeah.
maybe we'll start to just do some product tours.
Yep. So it really depends on how your product functions and the level of complexity and how long it takes users to get to value. So if you have a product that it's really easy to sign up, get value immediately, single player, low complexity, think like Calendly or Loom, you just sign up and you get it. That's where I would recommend introducing like the freemium product or the free trial because you can sign up, get to value quickly, and then you can adopt a product led sales motion on top to drive even more value for that account. For other products where maybe it takes a week or two to see value and there's more complex of a setup because there's multi players, that might be the path to start with a product demo, because then you can have a demo to give you the value out of the product and start to see where those aha moments are. And then over time, have human assistance as you get to value. So it kind of is every company, I believe, can get more and more towards a product led sales, product led growth motion. It just depends on where you are in your journey, and really around the complexity and how long it takes to get to value for the end user that I would recommend kind of different paths.
Awesome. I mean, one thing that I would add to that, just as I think about this, is, well, what is possible for your product, right? And this is, I mean, this is why, again, we always go back to, um, you know, this idea that it has to be cross functional, because you might have an enterprise product like this product that historically has been sold a very specific way. Now
Yeah.
there might be an opportunity, and I don't know this. I mean, there's a lot of variables here, but there might be opportunity now to actually have a version of the product that has a component of it that is self-serve, right?
Yep.
Um, and that you didn't have before, right? And that opens up or expands your revenue opportunity, right? So it's not
Totally.
now taking over the historical or the traditional stuff. It's saying now we can actually open up and start to target
Hmm.
this part of the market, right? And then when they get to a certain point, then sales assist, right? Right. So all these sorts of things that I think open up, that you have to sort of consider, and it's not an
Yeah.
overnight, right? This takes a lot of time, and in fact, I was chatting with, and this is probably about 2-3 years ago, with a friend of mine who's like a leader in enterprise sales at Asana. I keep going back to Asana because I have so much. I guess I know some folks there, but he was now, they started off credit card swipes and transactions, and now he was in charge of, or partially in charge of, trying to go up market, right? And so, and you're talking about a product that is a decade old now trying to figure that out, right? So it's going to take some time, I think, but you got to start somewhere, like running that
Yeah.
experiment, start to get that data that then will allow you to make those decisions.
Totally. I have so many companies that reach out to me saying, we've been traditionally sales led, but want to start by offering a self serve version of this product or a free trial of this. And it can be baby steps and continuous experimentation until you get more and more there. So many different paths to get to PLG and PLS.
Totally. Alexa, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat, and thank you so much to everyone who's been asking questions and hopefully learning how to start to apply these these strategies. I'm going to go ahead and post our LinkedIn's in the chat here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and do check out POCUS. If you're an organization out there who's trying to figure this thing out, to go PLG or PLS, check it out, right? Well, you're getpocus.com, right?
Pocus.com. Yeah. Thank you so
Oh,
much,
okay.
George. Yeah, for having us and chatting about this. Always fun to talk to you. And we also have a community that you should definitely check out of around 2,000 people in Slack talking about this topic. So it's pocus.com/community. But thank you all so much for your incredible questions. George, as always, the PLG expert. Really, really appreciate chatting with you.
I just talked to a bunch of folks. Thank you so much, Ivana. Yeah, and so I just posted a couple links there to POCUS directly, and then to the POCUS um, community on Slack. So I'm part of it, and it's really like I got to give you a shout out, Alexa. Like, it's one of the best communities out
Oh,
there in
thank you.
B2B. Super vibrant. This really, I don't know. I would say it's the model to try to pursue
Oh, thank
to
you.
mimic out there. Um, and thank you so much to the Rev Genius folks for putting this together. If you do have any questions about Reprise as well, we're at reprise.com. I'll go ahead and post that as well. And again, we do these demos or product tours, and so it's also another form of PLG, which is so interesting. I'll end with what Kyle Poyer over at OpenView told me probably about 2 years ago or so. I said, Kyle, what is PLG? He says, anytime that a user is able to kick the tires or experience your product before making a decision. I thought that was interesting, because it's like, wow, that's vast. And it's like, that could be at the top of the funnel, right? So you're not a customer yet. That could also mean that you're a customer, right? So
Mhm.
upsells and expansions, huge,
Exactly. I love that
huge, huge
definition. I'm going to
opportunity.
steal that.
Steal it. It's awesome. Kyle is fantastic. All right. Well, without further ado, hope everyone out there is having a wonderful